Hey guys, for those of you that don't know me, I have been a challenger player since set 3. There's been a new patch, which means a new flex guide. And in these guides, I'll be giving you a concise explanation on how to climb in the current meta. So in the current meta, fast line got nerfed a lot. What basically happened is they changed the odds of hitting a 5-cost headliner at level 9 from 10% to 2%. This changes the meta a lot because back then, you were super incentivized to completely skip level 7 and 8 and go straight to 9 because you're pretty much guaranteed to stabilize at level 9 because you'll guarantee to hit like a 5-cost headliner, assuming you have like 30 gold. But that's not the case anymore, so now you're a lot more incentivized to roll at level 6, level 7, and level 8 to stabilize your board. Usually at 3-2, you roll at level 6 a little bit if you don't have a good board. And at level 8, at 4-2, you roll for the first 4-cost chosen you hit, or you donkey to 0 until you're stable, and then you go 9. Like, even if you hit like a 4-cost headliner at level 8 and you go 9, a lot of the times you don't usually you open sell your 4-cost to hit a 5-cost, but you actually don't really do that anymore because the odds of you getting a stronger chosen than your 4-cost headliner is really, really low because it's 2%. So like that really changes like the level 9 gameplay. Because the level 8 comps are going to be a lot more prevalent now, 80 flex is really strong in my opinion. Caitlyn, Ezreal, Viego, Zed, Akali are all pretty good. They abuse like a similar set of items, and recently blue buff got buffed, and it basically indirectly buffs Ezreal, and Akali and Kiana as well because they're really good users of blue buff. I also think that AD is like a bit easier to play around Heartsteel in the mid to late game at level 8. Like for example, Caitlyn, you play around Aphelios, which is Heartsteel. Ezreal is a Heartsteel. Zed is a crowd diver. You can play around Yone for Heartsteel. And if you're playing Heartsteel at level 8 and you're healthy, it basically allows you to cap out your board way easier to get to 9. There are still some really good AP boards. The ones I recommend are going to be Disco and KDA. The reason these two are good is because they play around really cheap units at level 8. For example, Disco Dazzlers, you play around like Nami, Gragas, Echo. These are all like 1 and 2 costs that are actually pretty good at level 8. But eventually you do want to cap out around Sona, Alawi, Kiana, Ziggs. KDA, you just abuse the superfan units and like the cheap KDA units. For example, Evelynn, Kaisa, Seraphine, and all the superfan units are 1 and 2 costs. Some reroll comps are good right now. Reroll Jax, Reroll Punk, Reroll Yasuo, and Reroll Yone are still good. So in the S tier, we have the Bill Gates and the True Damage +1. If you get a spat, you usually want to play into this comp. It's really, really strong. In the A tier, Ezreal, Caitlyn, Disco, Vertical Crowd Divers, and KDA are all there. And these are going to be the reroll comps that are strong right now. Updated the augments. Also, by the time I post this video, I'll be streaming. And I updated the econ guide and the headliners. And if you're interested in VODs, I also have a separate YouTube channel where I explain a lot of my thoughts on how I play actual games. So feel free to check it out. And let's jump right into the guide. First comp on the list is going to be True Damage +1. So this is the comp right now that you generally want to play towards if you get a spat at any point in the game. It has the highest cap at level 8. And the strategy for this comp is you generally want to play around one of the AZ carries and put one of the spats on them. So for example, there's a Caitlyn variation, there is a Zed variation, and there's also an Ezreal variation. So in the Caitlyn variation, chances are you're going to be playing around the 3 superfan units throughout the early game, and then once you get 6 true damage, you play at level 8. You generally want the Caitlyn chosen, and itemization for her is going to be true damage spat, GS plus red buff. You don't have to go to these items. You generally just want to go like one item that makes her cast more, like Shojin, red buff, and one pure damage item. And this could be something like GS, it could be Deathblade, it could be IE. Akali just goes with your typical bruiser-ish items, so BT, Hodge, Deathblade, Edge of Night is also pretty good as well. IE is not even bad on her. Any AD items, itemization for Akali doesn't really matter that much, and you just throw all your leftover stuff on Kiana when you find her, and all your tank items on your main tank. So the other variation, if you don't hit Caitlyn, is if you hit like a chosen Zed. Crowd Diver Zed is the preferred one because it enables you to play around 4 Crowd Diver. So in this case, it's the same shit, 6 true damage, but instead you're playing Yone for an additional Crowd Diver, and you have Kiana, and then you play a second Guardian like Thresh. If you don't find the Kiana at your level 8 roll down, you probably only just play 2 Crowd Diver, or like if you get Crowd Diver, you probably don't play another Crowd Diver at all, and you just play like random valuable units that you find at level 8. The last variation is the Ezreal variation, probably the weakest one out of the 3 in my opinion, but it's still good because it allows you to get to level 9 if you hit Heartsteel. It allows you to play Aphelios, and then you just play like your 6 true damage people, and then you just go 9, and then you flip your board into like a better user of true damage spat and like better units in general. On to the AD flex boards. So Ezreal and Caitlyn right now are pretty good as standalone units, But probably one of the strongest AD boards you can play at level 8 is going to be a board like this. Honestly, this is probably the board you even play at level 9. Eventually, you just drop out of 3 Heartsteel and you just play Lucian for 2 Jazz and you throw in a +1. The problem with this comp though is that it is really item heavy. So I would look towards playing this comp if like you're playing in a galaxy where you get like an extra component on carousel, or you have a lot of augments that gives you a lot of extra items. This would be the comp you want to play for AD because you have 2 carries and you have a lot of different tanks to itemize. So a lot of the times you don't end up playing this variation, you're just playing around only Ezreal and only Caitlyn. In the only Caitlyn variation, generally I like playing around 4 rapid fire in the mid game, and then once you get to 9 you can drop out of 4 rapid fire and only play 2. With Caitlyn, I really like playing around 3 Heartsteel level 8. The reason why is because you can play around Aphelios. It's really easy to splash in set, and then if you're splashing in set, you just throw in a Cassante and for 2 Sentinel with Garen, and you just itemize all your tank items on your Poppy. Itemization for Caitlyn, she really likes 1 item that helps her cast, and then 2 damage items. So for example, red buff, Deathblade GS is good. The red buff could also be like Shojin. You can also throw in IE instead of GS. And then if you're playing around the Ezreal variation, for Ezreal, you almost always want to play into Heartsteel if possible because Ezreal himself is a Heartsteel unit. The strength of Ezreal is that he's a pretty good unit to do damage, but he is a unit that easily gets you to level 9 because it lets you tech in Heartsteel really easily. So at the minimum, you want to play 3 Heartsteel, but if possible, you want to play around 5 Heartsteel at level 8 and play for the win out to get to 9 and then cash out with like infinite items. So this is the board I like to play at level 8. Again, I generally like to itemize the set or the Poppy. Set because you're generally playing around Heartsteel, and then because he's a Monsher, a lot of the time you find a random 2-star Poppy. She's going in, and you generally want to itemize your Poppy instead. Later on at level 9, you just drop out of like 5 Heartsteel once you cash out. So for example, you could lose this Aphelios, you lose this Cassante, and then just play like the standard level 9 frontline legendary board. So for example, stuff like Yorick, Alawi, Thresh, etc. Itemization for Ezreal is blue buff, red buff, and IE. Ezreal is really good blue buff abuser along with the red buff. The third item is really flex. Usually you just want like some random AD item. So a new comp that creeped up in the current meta is going to be Reroll Jax. So this comp, I would only play towards this comp if you get the EDM chosen for Jax and you have a lot of money in the early game. Like for example, if you ended up having 5 loss and then just find like a random Jax. You could play towards this comp if you have the items. He's a really good comp that stabilizes at level 6. Basically, the game plan for this is you slow roll at level 6 for just Jax, and then usually you have to all in at 4-1 for 3-star Jax because that's when everyone else is going to spike. And once you get your 3-star Jax, you play this board, and then you just push levels. And the board you generally want to play towards is going to be a board like this. This gives you a few more dual carry potential with Zed. He could hold all your leftover AD items, and then all of your tank items usually want to go on your Poppy. And this board usually could actually like top 2 most of your games if you end up hitting the 3-star Jax and you get your 2-star Zed online. So another comp you play into right now is going to be Crowd Divers. Right now there's 2 different ways to play into vertical Crowd Divers. One is the Reroll Yone variation, and the other one is just going to be if you hit like a random Crowd Diver chosen at level 8, which is Zed. So the first way, you generally want to play into Yone if you find like a random Crowd Diver Yone at level 6 or 7, and you have the Econ or like a shitty champion duplicator to go for the 3-star Yone. Game plan for this is to just slow roll at level 7 until you hit 3-star Yone, and then you push levels for 6 Crowd Divers. In the beginning, you're not going to have access to Kiana, so you're only going to have 4. So basically you'll play Yone, Katarina, and Zed, and then you don't play these 2. You just play some random tanks until you find the Kiana, and then you play 6. The other variation of the Crowd Divers is if you're just playing around Zed. So Zed is a unit that is strong, but he usually cannot like solo carry like your team fights. So generally, when I play Zed, I like playing like a secondary carry, like Caitlyn. Caitlyn usually helps out with some of the frontline damage to enable Zed to wrap around to their backline and finish the fight. So if you're playing the Zed variant, chances are you're playing Yone. If you're playing Yone, chances are you want to play into 3 Heartsteel to get to 9. So I like playing like Aphelios Caitlyn for giving me access to 3 Heartsteel and also giving me some extra damage. You also, like, if you find the Kiana later and you get your last Heartsteel cash out, you could drop the Aphelios and play the Senna. This maintains the 2 rapid fire while keeping your true damage for your Senna. Or not Senna, Kiana. Of course, like, you don't have to play around, you don't have to play around the Caitlyn. Like, let's say, like, you just find a random Ezreal. Like, for this comp, you just need some extra damage because Zed can't do enough damage on his own, so you just play, like, a random Ezreal, and that's like, fine, too. Ezreal plus 1 extra big shot, and then, like, you could just play a board like this and you can still top 4. Itemization wise for Zed just really likes all of like the bruiser-ish items. So GS, Hodge, Runan's got buff, by the way. It's pretty good. BT is good. Edge of Night is also good as well. IE is fine on him as well. And if you get a true damage spat, he does really well with true damage spat if you combine it with Qiyana. All right, so on to the TF boards. The default level 8 TF board you want to play involves 6 disco. You're just playing around all of the shitter disco units like Nami, Gragas, Taric. Itemization for TF is just going to be Shojin, red buff plus Gunblade, and all of your tank items on your Blitzcrank. Simple enough. Later on, you do want to get out of these disco units. Usually, if you're able to get to this board at level 8 and have like 60 HP, chances are you could go 9 with this board and like not lose too much HP. And then you want to move into a board like this with all of the legendaries. So for example, Alawi, Yorick, Ziggs, Sona. You want to secondary carry your Ziggs, put all your Gwynsus, Shojins on your Sona, and then put all your leftover stuff on your Qiyana. There is also like another variant of TF where if you get like a lot of AD items, you don't know what to do with them. You can play around like the Ezreal variants. In the Ezreal variant, basically, instead of your second Dazzler, you end up playing Bard, and then because Bard is Jazz, you could tech in a second Jazz like Misfortune as well, which is also a big shot for Ezreal. And basically, you're just duo carrying the TF and the Ezreal. I like this variant a lot because sometimes if you're playing TF, you just get dropped like a lot of random AD items. You don't know who to put them on. Ezreal is a pretty good like variation you can play into. And also the thing with TF is like a lot of the times, TF on his own generally doesn't do enough damage to solo carry as well. Like TF just like shoots all of his cards out into the backline, and then a lot of the times like they just heal back up. That's why red buff is like so good on TF. But if they heal back up, you end up having to shoot everything out again, and then they're just not gonna die. Ezreal really helps out with like that extra backline damage to close out the fights early. Because for TF to win, he really needs to scale to the end of the fight. Alright, so next comp on the list is going to be KDA. Two main variations you can play here. First one is if you get like a chosen KDA unit. For example, chosen Akali KDA, Ahri KDA, you just play 7 KDA, 3 superfans. Play all the cheap units. Strength of this comp is it lets you go 9 very easily because you're playing a cheap board. Ahri really likes blue buff, Nashor's Gunblade. She also likes GS as well. She actually doesn't really like the extra AP that much because she usually just one-shots their frontline anyway. So you just want something that makes her cast more or just gives her more healing. Akali, you really likes red buff, Hodge, and IE. The other variation you play is if you get like a Spellweaver +1 for Ahri instead, in which case you're just playing 5 Spellweaver. 5 Spellweaver actually got buffed, so it's a bit better now. But the variation you want to play is just going to involve Sona instead for your 5th Spellweaver, and you just put Gwynsus on her to enable you to scale. For both boards, your goal is usually to try to get to 9 and then drop out of like the KDAs eventually if you have the money to, and play into like the legendary units. So next comp on the list is going to be Annie. Pretty straightforward. Probably the strongest 1-cost reroll comp aside from Jinx maybe. But game plan for this is if you get like an emo Annie early and you get a lot of Annies, you just hard force this, 5 loss into neutrals, and then you roll down at level 4, 8 out of 10 EXP until you get 33 gold. Econ back up, and then usually you just all in again at 3-5 for your 3-star Annie, and you play a board like this at level 6. Push levels at level 8, you just usually play some more frontline or 2 additional Spellweavers, and you usually play for like a 2nd or 3rd. Itemization wise, Annie likes Shojin, Nashor's. Her super fans item is going to be the Jeweled Gauntlet. And yeah, that's it. Alright, so on to the level 9 boards. These are the boards that you want to play into if you get to level 9 and you somehow get like a 5-cost headliner. It's a bit unlikely right now, but if you do, you want to be prepared for the situation. So the AP variation of the level 9 board is you're just dual carrying the Sona and the Ziggs. You splash in 2 Jazz, which is going to be Lucian and Bard. This also gives you Dazzler. And your default frontline is just going to be Alawi, Yorick, Set, and Thresh. This is the strongest possible frontline you could play at level 9, and then you just splash in a random Qiyana just because she's probably the strongest 5-cost unit in the game right now. Itemization wise, Sona just holds all your Gwynsus and your Shojins. She will enable the rest of your team to do a lot of damage. Items for Ziggs don't really matter that much. You just put all of your leftover mana and AP items on your Ziggs because Ziggs will do a lot of damage as long as Sona casts. The other board you want to play into is going to be the AD variant where you play around Jhin instead. So in this variation, the front line is the same. In this case, you're just playing around 2 Jazz, which includes Misfortune for Big Shot and Lucian. And if you're playing Lucian, it gives you access to Senna, which is a rapid fire, and the true damage, which will enable Senna to start farming you items. Itemization wise for Jhin, it's going to be blue buff, Gunblade, and Deathblade. Deathblade could be GS as well, it could be IE, and the blue buff could also be Shojin if you don't have a blue buff as well. All right, so this sums up my 13.25 flex guide. If you guys enjoyed this video, would really appreciate it if you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel and also follow me on Twitch. I'm actually streaming right now by the time this video is posted. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop by or just say hi. That's it for now, and I'll see you guys later.